Okay, we're here.
We're
Yeah,
here.
MGM, welcome back to the Chainlink Fall Hackathon. I'm here with Emily from Truffle, who's going to give us an intro to Truffle. And with that, I'll drop out of the stream and let you take it away.
Okay, sounds good. Cool. Hi, guys. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. I only have one laptop right now, so you guys will see me siphon through multiple screens on my laptop. But here we go. I'll start with my slides. So as he said, let's start from the beginning. I am Emily, so I am the developer advocate for Truffle. For me, all things Truffle. Really excited to give you kind of an overview of everything that we have to offer, as well as what's coming up in the future. So on that note, yeah, let's just go over agenda. I'm going to talk about all the great things that Truffle offers you if you decide to use our CLI. Move on to a live demo so you can see it in action, and then talk to you a little bit about Truffle's roadmap for the future. So what is Truffle Suite? I personally would brand it as the most comprehensive suite of tools for smart contract development. So what that means is we offer you an end-to-end development lifecycle. So when you're building your smart contracts, you need to manage the entire flow, right? So that's building it, testing it, debugging it, and then deploying it as well to your various live test nets locally, etc. With Truffle, we also offer the ability to write scripts as well as plugins. So if you have processes that are pretty common or lengthy, you can throw those all in a script, just run a Truffle exec, run it all at once. Alternatively, also put plugins into kind of a plugin marketplace, which you can do. I think we will demonstrate with one of the boxes later. Aside from that, Truffle also allows you to interact directly with the blockchain. So kind of off the cuff testing, for example, you might have a normal test file that you write, which can be lengthy. But if you just want to say like, hey, call this random function on a contract, you have that ability to do that with Truffle as well. And the last piece, like I said, with testing, you have 3 ways you can write tests. You can write them in Solidity, so for like more like, I guess, bare metal scenarios. And then you also offer tests with JavaScript and TypeScript. So that's going to be for situations that are more integration focused. Alternatively, if you are already just coming in from a background of understanding JavaScript texting, that is like what I would recommend. The next piece is our local blockchain environment. So maybe you guys might have heard of something called Ganache. So Ganache is a local test chain that will bring up a, I guess, a local blockchain instance with pre-funded accounts. Ganache is really cool because it allows you to really configure a local test environment, specifically forking mainnet or various live test nets with 0 configuration. So for those of you who don't know what forking is, that's basically saying like, I'm going to copy the state of the blockchain on mainnet and bring it in locally. What that means is you can basically unlock accounts is what we call it. So you can pretend like you're using like X wallet from whatever user to interact with the smart contract, for example, get pre-funded accounts as well on mainnet. So instead of having to actually test in production with real money, you would be using like Ganache's local funded accounts. And different ways as well. I think one of the coolest things that you can do with Ganache actually is interact with it programmatically. So within your test that you're writing, maybe you want to automate a test specifically with a Ganache instance that has like X configurations. So for example, with a configuration that you can fork mainnet, unlock this account, auto mine in X amount of seconds, and incorporate that all into a JavaScript test, for example. And the last piece that Ganache offers is it will track kind of all of your transactions. And alongside that, internally, if you choose to log statements, so we support Ganache's console log, we support Hardhat's go into the live demo, but just kind of want to give you a brief overview of what we offer. The next piece is best-in-class debugging. So also kind of for those of you who are new smart contract developers, kind of the history of blockchain development so far has been essentially console log. If you talk to a lot of developers now, how do they debug? Is they just print everything. That's a really great entry point for beginners. But then, that produces like two problems, right? So the first problem is once you deploy a contract, let's say you deploy a contract to mainnet, right? And something goes wrong and you're trying to figure out what's going wrong with that transaction. If all you had was console log, you are limited to whatever you had already logged when you deployed. However, with Truffle, we have Truffle debugging. So essentially what that allows you to do is kind of have the full features of what you would normally expect in a robust debugger. So that's stepping in and out of functions, setting breakpoints, observing like all the variables within your context. So not just what you've logged, but everything that you've interacted with, both locally, as well as, this is really cool, on mainnet or testnet. So essentially what you do is you would fetch the, what do you call it? The transaction hash, and you can debug it and actually step into the source code. So in that specific case, if we're interacting with a smart contract that has been verified either by Etherscan or Sourceify, you will actually be able to pour that contract information locally and then see what's going on. So it's not even a contract you have to have on your own computer. That's really cool. I'm really excited to demo that. Next piece is UX-centered design. So I think another one of the great things about Truffle that we've really been focusing on is developer UX. So specifically, if you don't know this, we've introduced a new VS Code extension, which really takes kind of all the elements you need in smart contract development and like plopping it into a UI. Again, I think a really great entry point for beginners, but also I think for someone who's doing really intense development, having it all in one workplace really like kind of smooths out the flow. So I will also be demoing that as well. Next piece. So I think Truffle right now, we're really moving towards a security first model. That comes in two pieces, right? So first off, I would say this kind of also combines with Dev UX, where essentially it's, you can deploy and sign transactions using your Truffle dashboard. This is a UI that's just brought up, and you can sign things with MetaMask. Again, much easier if I actually demo it, but for those of you who are smart contract developers, the kind of usual workflow right now, if you're familiar with it, would be you would put your private key in an environment variable, which obviously dangerous, right? Don't expose your private keys. Don't push that to GitHub. It is, obviously best practice to have a separate wallet for like a development wallet versus your like wallet with your real ETH. But regardless, even then, like faucets dry up, you don't want to lose all your tests early, stuff like that. So this is really cool, I think, in terms of protection. Other piece, just kind of a brief touch on, if you guys aren't familiar with Truffle as part of Consensus, Consensus is kind of this overarching company that owns a lot of different products. So if you've heard of Infura, if you've heard of MetaMask, those are all kind of in the Consensus family. One other part that we have is this product called Diligence. So Diligence is our smart contract security auditing feature. And so we are doing tighter integrations with Diligence to bring you things like analysis, fuzzing, and like, I guess, dedicated Solidity visualization for clarity into like what might be going wrong. So again, I think Truffle's kind of comprehensive in the sense that we are really focusing for when you are taking your app to production, right? I don't know if this is the last slide. I don't remember, but robust L1 and L2 support. So basically, if you're wanting to go multi-chain, for example, Truffle will support anything that is EVM compatible, as well as Ethereum, JSON, RPC compatible. So multi-chain is the future, right? Taking the pros of X-chain while removing the cons. So really, when we move into this layer 2 world, Truffle is really focusing on how do we make that multi-chain experience, development experience, more robust. I will kind of touch on that at the end, but more things to come. Well, Truffle's big, guys. There's a huge suite of tools. So I think maybe for the purposes of a hackathon, you'll mostly be interacting with like the Truffle project itself. But if you want to kind of think about Truffle, we also offer actually NPM packages. So one thing that is really cool about Truffle, you guys might not know, is we have these NPM packages called Truffle Decoder, Truffle encoder, Truffle fetch and compile, etc. It's a huge suite of things. Doesn't really have to do with actually smart contract development. Specifically has more to do with decoding hex data. So just to clarify what that looks like, basically when you are getting transaction information, it just is like this huge string of hex data, and it is kind of meaningless. And how do we make that into machine readable code? Truffle actually offers this thing called Truffle Decoder. So if you've ever interacted with MetaMask, there is a UI portion of MetaMask called Transaction Insights, which will basically translate your transaction into like smaller pieces, right? So like, what coin was it? What are the values? Like what is being called? It's very robust, and it does integrate with MetaMask. We are integrating that with Dashboard as well, to basically give you more insight into what's happening in your development workflow. And the last piece actually is Truffle is also moving towards a more CLI agnostic kind of experience. So when I say that, I mean, you might think, okay, I have Foundry, I have Hardhat, I have Truffle to choose from. I can address this in questions later. I definitely think each one has its pros and its cons. Kind of where Truffle is moving is my favorite features of Truffle are actually gonna be, or already are, I guess, compatible with whatever kind of development environment you choose to work with. So even if you don't have like a Truffle config in your project, for example, you decide to start with Hardhat, there are features of Truffle that are really great, I think, for the development experience that you can still use as sort of a plug and play scenario. So let's move on to the demo portion. I'm gonna quickly go back and jump into StreamYard to make sure I didn't miss anything. Like I'm just speaking into a venue. Okay, cool. Vacuum. Cool. So let us start with just kind of how to start a Truffle project. So I'm going to open up a new instance of VS Code. How do I do this new window? Cool. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the Truffle VS Code extension. So this is going to be, what I said offers like a really strong development UX experience. So you would just go to Marketplace here and then look for Truffle. The one I'm working with specifically is gonna be our pre-release version. So when you download it from Marketplace, you should choose that one. There's some bug fixes in there that I think would make your hackathon experience much easier. Diving into it, here is our Truffle kind of extension. There's nothing here populated because we actually haven't opened up a Truffle project yet. So what I'm going to do is after you download it, you have this ability to start a new Solidity project. You have three choices. Truffle init is just going to give you a vanilla vanilla Truffle project. No contracts, nothing configured. Specifically, I think what's really helpful for hackathons is we have this idea of Truffle boxes. So Truffle boxes are basically starter projects, anything from scaffolding for popular use cases to tutorial examples that you can use to learn. So for example, DEF CON just happened, right? I actually gave a talk on Optimism L2 bridging, and specifically we used a Truffle bridge box that set up both a project specifically targeted towards how do you develop a multi-chain application, and then on top of that, adding in that educational component of what does it actually look like to bridge, right? So in this case, for example, we are at a Chainlink hackathon. I think Patrick was very nice enough to actually create a Chainlink box for us, which will be kind of a good entry point for, I guess, starting your Truffle Chainlink interactions. But anyways, I'm just going to create a new folder called Chainlink. Oh, let's just call it Chainlink box. Create, select new project path, and it should create it. And it brought in a bunch of information here. So you can do it through the VS Code extension. Just to remind you, what I did was a Command-Shift-P, new Solidity project, and you can choose between the three. If you go to our Truffle site, there are a whole list of different boxes you can choose from. In this case, we have the Chainlink box. The other option you could do is also just do a Truffle unbox Chainlink box if you prefer the CLI. and then a folder of your choice, so like folder name. But we already created it, so I'm not going to get into it. If we go in here, so now you see basically, well, actually, let's step over what's in a Truffle box as well as what would come in a Truffle init. So first off, you have your contracts folder. So this is where you're going to store all of your contracts that you are working with. Specifically, you can see here in your Truffle config, this is going to be the file to tell Truffle, what are our networks that we care about, specifically where we are deploying to. Our Solidity version, you can also specify here as well. If you are planning using a plugin, that would also go in your configuration. In this case, for the Chainlink box, they chose to add in the Truffle plugin verify. So again, that's just a very easy way to automate smart contract verification on Etherscan. And then last piece here, I guess in the Chainlink box that they had created, they chose specifically, I think now that I look at it, two things, right? So they chose to start Ganache with a a non-random instance. So to step back and explain that right now, Ganache, if you just start Ganache, it would look like this, basically. And it would pull up like a bunch of random accounts, private keys, and a random secret key. However, I think for the purpose of this box, they wanted to keep it stable. So they, I guess if you were following this, they would start it with Ganache-D, which would just keep it stable. So it's in the README if you want to go through the Chainlink box. This next piece as well is going to be, is there anything else interesting in this Truffle config? Yeah, okay, so I think one thing that wasn't mentioned is going to be a customized build folder. I have another project actually that I will take you through, because I imagine probably with your Chainlink hackathon projects, you will care about adding in a front end, which will require special kind of configurations in your Truffle config. So I will touch on that later. But continuing to go through the Chainlink box specifically, so they have all these contracts coming through, as well as, let's see, migration. So this is going to be where your deployments are. So essentially, you can see here, you would choose to basically just deploy a contract. In this case, you're getting the contract name from one of, I guess, the contracts that they created here. And then the last piece would be, what do you call it? Pulling in, I guess, just deploying like the different contracts here. And so there are multiple ones here. In order to deploy them, you would, let me backtrack here. So there are multiple deployments here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can do a Truffle migrate, which will deploy all of them. You can also choose to specify one at a time. So if you wanted to do 2, there's that capability as well. Just to kind of touch on like why Truffle gives that opportunity. This is more of, I would say, like a multi-chain kind of scenario. So I guess I'm kind of just going off the cuff here, which is pretty interesting if you guys are thinking about like layer 2s. What that might look like is, for example, you are deploying one contract to layer 1, deploying another contract to layer 2. These contracts have different configurations, right? Because one of them cares about layer 1 contracts, layer 1 networks. The other one requires layer 2 contracts, layer 2 networks, which requires 2 different Truffle configs. So in order to alternate between the different layers, that's why we give you the ability to actually number your deployments so that you can coordinate that kind of multi-chain deployment. But that explains the numbers and how you would interact with them. And like I said, we offer scripts and then tests as well. So I'm actually going to dive into an example project that I had done just to give you kind of a better idea of the entire workflow. So I'm going to exit out of this. That's what the Chainlink box looks like. I'm not going to save anything here. So here, yeah. So I had built a tutorial a while back based on an NFT rental marketplace. So specifically using the ERC 4907 rentable standard and then moving that into a marketplace. So it's pretty complex. In this case, it offers both a client as well as smart contracts. I went ahead and openly opened up the smart contract folder, which was underneath Truffle. That's why this looks like that. But if you, I guess, went up a level, so if you go, let's just do an LS here, you can see that there's a client folder with, like, I guess, different things that you would need for building the front end. But in this case, I'm only going to be talking about smart contracts. So again, kind of what that workflow looks like is you might open up a project. And yeah, oh, what I wanted to point out here that's different. Oh, I actually didn't do it in this one. Let me open up a different one. Whoops. Demo. No, where am I? CD. Where am I at this point? Let's open up Bridget. Maybe this one is good. There's also a client here. Okay, cool. So when you guys are building your smart contracts for your hackathon project and you want to incorporate a front end, you will need to put the built contracts into your client folder. So by default, this will just be a build. I think it'll just create like a dot build is where it's going to build into. But because we want specifically to migrate the build, put the compiled JSONs into the client folder, you will need to specify this piece right here. So that's that example. Anyways, I guess moving on, what am I going to talk about? Cool. So let's say, okay, I'll take you through our development lifecycle, right? So you started your project, you maybe unboxed a box, or you started with Truffle init, right? And I wrote all my contracts. What's the first thing we need to do? The first thing we need to do is actually let's deploy it and test it locally. So you have like a lot of different ways you can do this. Truffle is like very, I guess, kind of customizable to that extent. So to that piece, you can either choose to start it off locally. You can start a Ganache instance here if you so desire. So let's do this as a fork. Well, actually, no, let's just do this as a local one. Create new network, Ganache service, let's do local. You can specify this anywhere. Let's just call this 5454. I don't know, that's random. And development, let's call this VS Code Ganache. VS Code. And so that'll create a network. And you can go ahead and start Ganache here, and it will bring it up in output down here. So that's one way to start up your local environment. The other way is just to do a vanilla Ganache. There's a lot of different configurations. By default, it will open it up in 8545. The other way you can also do it is there is a Ganache UI, which I think is also a really good entry point for beginners. It's not as powerful as our CLI versions, but if you just want to visualize kind of what it looks like, you will have that open here. But actually, wait, we'll get into this later. Cool. And then, so that's the first piece. You would bring up your local environment and you would, I guess, if you want to do it off the cuff, for example, so like I had mentioned the Truffle console, you can deploy your contracts. So you can either deploy your contracts doing this, selecting the VS Code network, and that's how you would migrate it. Alternatively, like I said, with the VS Code extension, we are really trying to consolidate it into the UX. So you can also just deploy all of them here. So let's deploy VS Code. And that would deploy it all here. And so now if you look at it in deployments, you have all of your ABIs here for easy access. And as you can see, if we go to Ganache server, it'll show kind of where everything is. And so that's a migration. And at this point, we can also do console. And because we did it with the, I guess, what was that network called? Here, local VS Code, console network. Whoops. VS Code. Oh, I'm not in the correct folder. CD, where am I? Unleashed, rentable. I'm in the NFT marketplace. Oh. And then I need to go into my Truffle folder, and then I'm here. So then I can interact with it however I want. So I can do like a let contract equal, oh wait, guess what's one of the contracts? Rentable NFT deployed. And then you can do stuff like mint. Oh, and it'll mint. And so that's interacting with it off the cuff. Obviously, in smart contract development, you will want to be testing it. So again, the way to test it would just be a Truffle test, and you select your network. By default, if you don't do anything, it will always choose the development network here. If you have a development network defined, it will try to put it on 8545. This is going to fail right now because we don't have any Ganache instance running on 8545. You might also ask, wow, that seems really annoying that you would have to bring up a Ganache instance for testing. This is not true. So if this had been commented out, and so that means Truffle can't find a development environment. If I run a Truffle test, it will just bring up one on its own, I think on 9545. But anyways, it'll bring it up and it'll tear it down. And so that's kind of the Truffle test workflow. You can also do it one by one. So if I only wanted to run Truffle test market, whoops, it would just do one of the tests. This is pretty powerful because you can actually also test specific, you can filter it. So you could also filter by keywords. So anything that says rentals, for example, you could just run only those tests. But yeah, that would be, so you built your files, you deployed it, you tested it. And then I guess the next thing that you would do maybe, so during your, I guess, hackathon flow, you will inevitably run into bugs. You will not figure out like what is going on, right? So when you're debugging your contracts or trying to figure out like what's going on, there's two ways that I think are really common. So like I said, there is the Ganache version of it. So let's do that. Basically, all you would do is an npm at ganache/console.log, and you would import it. I think I've already downloaded it, so I actually don't need to reinstall. Then so you would import the console sol, and then let's just say in here, I want to do a console log, a rentable pets mint. I want to know what the token URI I minted was. So let's call this token URI. In this case, I can run this script. So I have a script called mint.js. And I want to output it on, I guess this was my 5454 transaction. So let's just do a truffle exec scripts/mint. And again, I want to specify it on this Ganache instance I had brought up. So that's going to be, again, what was it called? This guy, this network. So if I executed it, it should work. And if I look at my output here, where did it go? Why didn't it log? This is a problem with live coding, guys. Did I do it on the correct one? No, what is going on? Oh, okay. I see. So, what happened was I changed this. I did not redeploy it or rebuild it. So I will need to do that. Remember last time I did it through the VS Code extension. If you don't want to do that, you can just... So anyways, I changed the contract, so I do need to deploy it again. And I'm hoping that is what had happened. Yep. And so as you can see here, now it's been printed. So if you're trying to figure out what's going on, a lot of times the fastest way to do it is just do a console log. However, sometimes that's not the best way to do it. If you remember from the beginning, I was talking about Truffle's best-in-class debugger. So again, there are a few ways to do this. We offer it visually through Visual Studio Code. So all that is a Command-Shift-P. Then you'll find the debug transaction, and it will select from the Ganache servers that exist here. So you can actually open up multiple instances. So there's this one on local. I could do one that was like a mainnet fork, for example, and you can select between the three. But I only have this one. So let's say this server is what I care about. It gives you a history of everything you've done. In this case, the thing that we are working on is the minting portion. So let's just hit mint. And then I think you hit run and debug. And this might be a little slow. Oh, guys, the joys of live coding, man. You get to see me burn and crash. But I don't know. It's fun. That's why we do it together. Oh, okay, cool. It did go. It just takes a little bit of time. So anyways, I chose this specific transaction. As you can see, we are starting from the top. We can get all of the information. None of this has been decoded yet because we haven't called a function. But if you remember, we were doing console log. So let's actually dive into here. I set a breakpoint. I can hit play. In which case, this time I know what is in token URI. I can get this message information, I think. Yep, so we know who the sender is. By default, we're going to be using the first account that Ganache had set up. This is something customizable that you can figure out if you want to switch between different accounts, modifying the sender. But anyways, yeah, so you have a bunch of information. You can step in. So if you notice, basically what I had done was I said, okay, rentable NFT. I actually want to step into the function of console log, which took me to the console sol file. And then you can just keep stepping over. If I want to step back out, I can, and then continue down and get all that information. So, I mean, that's a pretty good visual way. The Truffle CLI debugger is a lot more powerful. So the way you would interact with that is you actually you would do a Truffle debug, and then you would add your transaction hash here. I say it is more powerful in a few ways. First off, if you are starting with a hard hat project and you want to use the Truffle debugger, currently only the CLI is compatible with it. If you wanted to use the VS Code version of it, that's not compatible yet, but it is in the works. So if you wanted to use hard hat example and use Truffle debug, that would be why you'd use the CLI. Second piece actually is going to be, like I had mentioned, mainnet debugging. So what that looks like actually is this idea of customizing a Ganache instance. So in this case, here's an example. So I'm starting Ganache. With zero config, I'm just saying fork mainnet, fork up until this specific block number, unlock this account. So basically, I can act as if I did have the private keys of that account and I wasn't, and then also on a specific port. So if I hit enter, it should have all of that information. And now with Truffle Debug CLI, there's you can actually debug mainnet transactions. So what this does right here is, again, this is a transaction that is from mainnet. We actually have it locally because we did fork Truffle or Ganache mainnet. Specifically, I put it in mainnet dev. So if you look at my Truffle config, this is where it's defined, 7545 mainnet dev. And the last piece here is fetch external. So if you remember what I had said about, what do you call it? Getting the actual verified source code, that is what fetch external does. I did not put in an Etherscan API key, so this will take a little bit of time. So I'll just like let this run. Oh, unless it's going to finish right now. Maybe. No, I'm going to let it pause. But anyways, this will take a little bit longer because we do have to pull in all that information and compile external sources. But this is really cool. This is also going to be compatible with your hard hat project. So yeah, that would be like debugging. Oh, nice. Awesome. So example, I don't have this contract locally. Infinity Exchange is some random contract I found on Etherscan. So this is the CLI view. So bunch of different instructions. So like next, I think if you breakpoint at 171, nope, breakpoint 57. What is 57? Actually just chose a random number, so that might have ended the transaction. So let's pretend I didn't do that. But in the same way, you can see all the variables by printing V. You can add breakpoints, step in, step out. Oh yeah, see, look, I just chose a random one. So let's just not put that there. So I just keep hitting next. I wanted to find, cool. So console log, I want to step into that. What is the step into? So this is actually really cool. So this was a hard hat, I guess, project that used and deployed console log. As you can see, when I stepped into it, now I'm in a new file that I had also pulled from Etherscan. So this is really powerful. Maybe not necessarily something you need for a hackathon project because you guys haven't deployed anything. But I think debugging in general is really nice. So if you noticed for kind of all of these situations, I was debugging transaction hashes, which means it is something that needs to be a like something that would modify state, right? However, if you want to do something to check, for example, calls, you can do that within the context of a script that you write, or not the script, sorry, testing. So let's talk about test. So if you go to test marketplace, basically you can interrupt tests in the middle. So you could add a debug statement here if you wanted and interrupt it. Let's actually do a call statement if I have one somewhere here. Maybe this one, list NFT is just going to be listing. No, sorry. This is actually like a get NFTs, get listings. No, it's not a good one. Sorry, guys. I should have figured out a different one. Okay, here we go. Get listing fee. So let's debug this one right here. So this is a call function. It doesn't modify state. Currently, if you want to do a debug of like what's being called, you can only do this within a test. So this means you want to interrupt the test in the middle. And this is the test marketplace. JS debug, and I don't have network development specified, so I think this should just bring up a random one. Cool. And so as you can see, it interrupted it here in marketplace.getListingFee. So I guess that's all that was here. But essentially, yeah, that's how you would do it. And then you can just hit next. Here, if you wanted to know what listing fee looks like, you could hit a V and you get all of this information. You can also kind of filter that. But yeah, So kind of in your development lifecycle, that's what it looks like. Bring it up locally, test it. The last piece, I think also once you actually start doing testing, or like say you were in a production environment, you're actually going to be deploying your protocol. The next step past, deploying it locally, but actually deploying it to a test net, right? Again, a variety of ways to do this. So I think I don't have an example here. They put one, I think maybe, is there one here? Yeah. So if you look at this, the standard way, if you have been using other projects, would be needing to specify your mnemonic or private key in a .m file, retrieving that, and then providing this, and then it would just simply be a truffle migrate and then network. And this time you're choosing Gurley, or you would specify a Polygon, JPC, RPC endpoint, or whatever. However, again, going back into security first, dev UX first, Truffle provides this feature called Truffle Dashboard, which is actually, I think, one of my favorite features. So I've gone back to my marketplace example. Is you can deploy it using your MetaMask wallet. So again, a variety of ways to do this. You would first bring up Truffle Dashboard this way, and if I hit enter, it would bring it up on localhost right here. Alternatively, let's say I didn't want to do that, I can also bring it up and deploy via Truffle Dashboard. So this would actually do the full deployment. So I want to confirm that we are on Gurley. So I hit confirm. Basically, you can choose whatever network and it will change appropriately. Now it is in the process of deploying, right? So if I'm going to hit confirm, if you look back at my migrations, I am deploying 2 contracts. So I would expect 2 signatures. All that deployment information is here. Again, this does take some time because it is a live test net. The way to get around that, like I said, it's forking this locally. But anyways, so that was the first deployment, and now this is a second deployment. Before I hit confirm, actually, I want to talk about what's in here, right? So this is the parameters that were sent into your transaction. Not super meaningful, not really helpful. That's why, like I said, Truffle is very dev UX focused. You can expect in the future, this will actually be decoded by our Truffle decoder into more meaningful human readable format. So yeah, hit confirm, and that should deploy. I think I want to call out here, like I said, you notice this is on localhost 24012. If you remember, our Ganache instances were also opened up on a local host like port, so 9545, 8545, etc. That means these are cross CLI agnostic, right? So again, if you guys have worked with Hardhat before, it's very similar in the sense that you have a config of some sort where you specify the networks, in which case you would just actually specify localhost 24012 if you wanted to use dashboard with your Hardhat project. I do have a video on how to do it on our YouTube site, which is YouTube/Truffle Suite, TRUFFLESUITE, if you want to figure out how to do that. But anyways, that's dashboard, which is really cool. And it did properly deploy. And as you can see, all of that information is here under our Truffle VS Code extension. Otherwise, it would have just been in like a build folder here somewhere. I think I did hide it, so that's why you don't see it. But this is where all your ABIs live. So I think that might be everything for how you would start a Truffle project. Like I said, all of that boxes are a really great starter point. So that's just going to be on trufflesuite.com. If you go to boxes, we have a bunch here. The multi-chain ones I think are the most up to date, actually also the most interesting. But I think moving forward, let's actually talk about kind of what's coming up. Like I said, again, Truffle is really a tool for, I would say, like if you're taking your projects to production and like planning on building out like a really robust protocol. specifically because we are thinking about like really advanced use cases again. Like I said, we are multi-chain focused. I don't know what level of development everyone here is at, but if you want to think a little bit about layer 1, layer 2, I gave a talk on it at DEF CON, so you could find that recording. But like I said, if you remember in that migrations portion, you basically have to write a script specifying this one goes on layer 1, this one goes on layer 2, maybe there's another layer 1, whatever. And those can get complex, especially in bigger, robust protocols. So how Truffle is fixing this is something called declarative deployments. So essentially what it looks like is instead of you writing a long script telling us what contracts go where, it's just you basically declaring your state of like, this is the end state of, I want this contract to be here. I want this to be dependent on here, either in a JSON or a YAML file, and we will figure out all the magic behind it. So that's really cool. The second piece here in terms of how Truffle is moving multi-chain is Ganache plugins. So, I gave a brief overview of Ganache, right? Stuff like forking, for example. You might ask, can I use Ganache to fork layer 2 chains? The answer is yes and no. So yes, in the sense that it'll bring on the information. No, in the sense that there are differences in the layer 2 as from the L1 that will make it behave improperly. So I would not recommend that. Usually the workflow as it goes right now. So for example, if you're working in Optimism, they actually provide a Docker container that you can bring up and will bring up a local Optimism instance. That's fine. There's two problems with this that I have encountered when playing around with Optimism is number one, it's like very finicky. You have to have a very specific Docker version. And the second piece actually is it does not offer that forking capability. So for example, if you're trying to interact with Optimism bridges, those are pre-deployed contracts on a live testnet. So if you want to interact with those, you would always have to be interacting with Optimistic Girly. However, imagine in a world where you had an L2 flavor Ganache with forking. You could then fork that locally and interact with these pre-deployed contracts locally, so pre-funded accounts, again, way faster because you're not competing against other I guess people for resources and etc. And then secondly, I think third part is like just focusing on L2 infrastructure, right? So like I said, we have Truffle boxes dedicated towards multi-chain. As well as, and this is really interesting, like Truffle is focusing now on a Starknet box. So if those of you who aren't familiar with the layer 2 Starknet, it's a ZK rollup who is actually written in a language that is non-EVM compatible, right? So Truffle is like kind of moving towards the future of how do we support and create infrastructure to support like L2 chains like Starknet, for example. Second piece is DevUX. Like I said, our VS Code extension is really dedicated towards encapsulating that entire workflow. So actually, oh, I forgot to show this. I think this is out already. So if you actually open up networks, we had made a few transactions. Let's see. Yeah, okay, cool. Awesome, it is here. This is in the pre-release version. So this is basically the embedded Ganache UI. As you make transactions, these will be populated. You can imagine in the future, you might do like a click in here and then just debug like this transaction specifically. And this will get kind of more robust as time goes on. And again, this all kind of lives in the same workspace. In terms of developer UX, again, like I said, Truffle dashboard, I think is one of the best ways, especially for beginners, not to expose their private keys and stuff like that. But as I had mentioned, as that transaction information is being surfaced in the UI, there's a lot of really powerful ways that we can play around with demonstrating and surfacing that information to you as a developer to help better inform, why is your test going wrong? What information is being passed? Stuff like that. So you can expect that in the future. And then the last piece is environment workspaces. Again, not something you would necessarily need for a hackathon specifically, but when you are kind of going into a production environment, you're going to have networks you care about for testing locally, networks you care about for like development. So that would be like your live test nets, and then networks dedicated towards production. Right now, the way you would do it is just to do like a dash network and then have to choose each specific one. But imagine, if you have multiple networks, actually specifying that into a full environment. So instead of saying -s network Polygon, -s network blah, 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 you would actually just say like test, and it would run it against all of the chains that you had specified in that environment workspace. So that's really cool. There's actually like a lot of other stuff that is coming on that I cannot encapsulate in this entire time. But just want to take a step back again and just kind of think about Truffle as like a forward-looking product. We are part of Consensus, which owns MetaMask, owns Diligence, Truffle, and Infura. So there's a really strong, I think, powerful, value prop for just this really strong, robust ecosystem that all works together. But again, for the purposes of your hackathon projects, not necessarily something you want to consider now, but definitely something for the future. But yeah, so that is everything. I'm Emily, Truffle Developer Advocate. If you want to hear the latest on all things Truffle, follow me on Twitter, _EMJLIN or Truffle Suite. I do a weekly live stream series called Web3 Unleashed to teach you about all things Web3, as well as building dApps together. If you want to get started, docs are there, boxes are around. But yeah, I think I'm going to take questions now. Hopefully. Dashboard. Okay, cool. Let me stop sharing my screen. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, I am good to go. That was a brief Truffle overview. Definitely get started, play around with things. If you guys end up using Truffle for your hackathon project, regardless if you start with Truffle or you incorporate it using like Ganache or Truffle Dashboard, please let me know. I would love to see what you guys are working on. But otherwise, I guess this is it. Oh, okay. We do have a question. Can you create plugins? Yes, you can. So as I had mentioned before, there's docs, I think, on our website. Truffle plugins actually aren't that popular, but our most popular one is going to be that Etherscan verification one that just automates your Etherscan verification. I don't know how to repeat that in a different way. But it is cool in the sense that with that Truffle plugin, you can actually also do the verification through Dashboard as well. So really powerful. Okay. I don't actually know if there's a lag between this stream and YouTube. So I'm gonna.
I think you're
Are
good
we
to
good?
go. Yeah, we're good to go. Thank you so much. And yeah, appreciate it all. All right.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.